Welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks for joining us. Israel's defense minister has issued a stern warning. His country is ready to strike Iran. He says that Iran is just weeks away from getting the material it needs for a nuclear weapon.
The warning comes as Israel blames Iran for a deadly drone attack on an oil tanker. And as Chris Mitchell reports, the country now has a new president, a man who's been sanctioned for murdering his own people.
Ibrahim Raisi took over as the 8th president of the Islamic regime.
The sanctions imposed against the Iranian nation must be lifted. We will support any diplomatic plan that supports this goal.
Raisi spoke at his swearing-in ceremony where he touted his country as the true defenders of human rights and a force for peace in the region. Raisi is considered a hardliner, a carbon copy of religious leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and the first Iranian president to be sanctioned by the U.S. even before taking office.
Ibrahim Raisi is called the Butcher of Tehran, actually, because he has a long track record of killing his own people, going back to 1988. You can say that he's probably responsible for at least 10,000 Iranians being executed.
Len Katakovsky, a former senior advisor to the U.S. envoy for Iran, says although the Ayatollah is the ultimate decision maker, Raisi won't give up much in talks to reinstate the Iranian nuclear deal, officially known as the JCPOA.
We can expect them to play hardball, and we're seeing them playing hardball right now through their attacks on our interests, through the attacks on an Israeli-owned ship just a few days ago.
Katakovsky says it's the Iranian negotiating style.
What they're sensing is that the Biden administration is signaling weakness. They're seeing that there's no price that they have to pay after each of these attacks. And in return, instead of playing hardball, the Biden administration makes more and more concessions.
Israel, the U.S., and the U.K. are blaming Iran for the attack on the Israeli-operated oil tanker called Mercer Street that left 2 Europeans dead. Iran denies its involvement. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. is working with its partners on an appropriate response. And just today, Iran's proxy, the terrorist group Hezbollah, said it fired a barrage of rockets at Israeli positions close to the border with Lebanon. Hezbollah called it retaliation for Israeli airstrikes that came in response to rocket attacks earlier this week from Lebanon. Israel is trying to rally international support for sanctions against Iran. But some 70 countries and the European Union attended Raisi's inauguration Thursday. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said they shouldn't be there.
Raisi is the most radical Iranian president so far, and the competition is tough. I call on the European Union. One cannot talk about human rights and at the same time pay homage to a murderer and a hangman who has eliminated hundreds of opponents of the regime.
Israel's defense minister, Benny Gantz, and foreign minister, Yair Lapid, briefed ambassadors from UN security member states on Iran's involvement in the Mercer Street ship attack and its nuclear plans. Iran has violated all of the guidelines set in the JCPOA and is only around 10 weeks from acquiring weapons-grade materials necessary for a nuclear weapon. Therefore, it is time to act. The world must apply economic sanctions and take operative action against the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
The Iranians need to understand that it is impossible to sit peacefully in Tehran and from there ignite the entire Middle East. That is over.
Israel has long said it would not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. And now that it seems the clock is ticking, Israel will have to decide how far it will go to stop it. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, the problem is they may not be able to stop it. Iran is absolutely gearing its nuclear program to prevent Israel from taking it out with any single strike. So they're dealing with hardened underground bunkers. They're dealing with distributed production areas. They absolutely want to acquire a nuclear weapon. When they do, they want to hold the nation of Israel hostage. And that's why we're seeing these reports over and over again. But the whole concept that you can negotiate with them, that somehow or other you can bring them to a point where they won't aspire to get a nuclear weapon, that you can bring them into treaties and they'll honor those treaties. I just don't understand a foreign policy establishment that would ever go down that road, because we know all the provocations that they've done, dating back to the Carter administration and the revolution that put the Ayatollah in charge. So what part of drone strikes against shipping vessels, what part of drone strikes against U.S. Navy, what part of taking over U.S. Navy ships? You look at the number of provocations just in the past few years, and they're definitely testing our will. Under the Trump administration, we got very close to war and then backed off. Where are we going now? Well, I think we're going to blink. And will Iran get a weapon? Yes. Will Israel be able to stop that? Probably not, but I never count Israel out. We are in a very dangerous time. You look at the various hotspots around the world, North Korea, China, Iran, we are definitely being tested. Well, here at home, it's getting close to decision time for senators from both parties on the infrastructure spending bill. Efren Grand has that story from the CBN Newsroom.
Gordon, the Senate came to a standstill last night over possible amendments to the 2,700-page bill, which has a total cost of nearly $1 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office says the measure would add $256 billion to the projected deficits over the next decade. Republican senators want the bill to be completely paid for. Conservatives have argued some of the methods to pay for the bill's spending in the bill are just accounting gimmicks, and that it will add to the growing national debt. Turning now to COVID-19, the Delta variant is still surging across the country, and with it, a debate over how to best protect Americans. Jennifer Wishon explains.
State and local governments across the country are debating how to deal with this latest surge. This as health officials warn of possible future mutations worse than the Delta variant.
As the number of cases rise across the South, President Biden asked GOP governors this week to get out of the way of efforts to contain the virus. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis firing back, blaming the president for allowing COVID cases to come into the country through illegal immigrants.
Why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you.
The president dismissing him.
Governor who?
DeSantis. Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana account for nearly 40% of current COVID hospitalizations, putting a strain on their health systems and workers.
I've been doing this for a year and a half, and it feels like there's never going to be an end.
The surge comes with summer in full swing and local fairs and festivals cranking up.
It feels good. I got my shot, so I'm okay, I hope.
And a big smile with those eyes. Awesome. It's going to be a great year.
State governments are debating how to protect kids too young to get a shot. The governor of New Jersey today expected to issue a mask mandate for students K through 12 and school staff. In Arkansas, nearly 19% of cases are in children under 18.
Those children that cannot take a vaccine, that cannot have a vaccine at this point, those under 12, account for more than half of that percentage.
Governor Asa Hutchinson calling the legislature into special session, asking lawmakers to reverse a ban on mask mandates so local school districts can require them if they want.
This is not about a debate about mask mandates for those that can make their own decisions and have means to get vaccinated. This is a discussion about the school environment where schools can make decisions to add to the public health for their own school environment and for the children that they have a responsibility to protect.
A major concern, health officials warn the coronavirus could mutate into variants that evade current vaccines if the spread of the virus isn't contained.
And when you give it ample opportunity to mutate, you may sooner or later get another variant. And it is possible that that variant might be in some respects worse than the already very difficult variant we're dealing with now.
For the fourth consecutive week now, vaccination numbers are up. More than 70% of Americans have now received at least one shot, and boosters will soon be available for immunocompromised people. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
This all comes as some schools are back in session and others will be returning in just the coming weeks. Gordon?
Well, we all want to reopen. We all want our children back in school. But the problem is there's a new variant of the virus. This new Delta variant is highly infectious. It's equally infectious to chicken pox. So that gives you an idea of how fast it can spread through an elementary school. Those children can't get vaccinated. So should they be required to wear masks just to protect themselves and to protect their families when they go home? I think this would be a good idea. I know many people are against masks, and there's all kinds of questions about the CDC guidance. And CDC said a year and a half ago, masks don't work. Then they said masks do work. And then they said, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. Now they're saying if you're vaccinated, you need to wear a mask. So they keep changing their mind. But here's the issue. The issue is whenever you have a virus bloom, and that means lots of people getting the infection, you give that virus a chance to mutate. And those mutates tend to be more infectious. That's what we're seeing so far. So we've already got the Delta variant live and kicking right here in the United States. There's another one called Lambda that's getting ready to come to us. How many more blooms do we need to have before we realize we really have to tamp this down so that the virus doesn't have an ability to infect other people and in that mutate yet again? Do we want to go back into lockdowns? I think the answer clearly is no. But can we at least mask so we're not spreading it?